Oh, what? Sorry about that. And we're back with our Let's Play of Uru Complete Chronicles. I think my recording software had a bit of a hiccup, so let me just check something real quick. Yeah, we are in fact recording. Okay, good to know. Last time we linked to Eater Gira, and it's a bit dry, not counting the waterfalls. What else is here? What else is here? Well, there's this book. Somewhere a bit more hospitable, I think. Still no Lincoln Path back here. I'm going to be really annoyed. I swear there's supposed to be like a journey clock here at somewhere. Well, suppose we could also check out this borrowed stone. Oh boy, it seems we have lore in our future. Let's see what we can spy off our little eye. Wait a tick. Is this the like that little spot we saw at Sharper's office somewhere in those buildings? One of those windows up there, I think. Good to know. Alright then. First things first, cool ad. Let's just how do you turn the camera around without looking at your character on? Oh, whatever. It's cool at whatever the case is. Alright, time to read journals. Pseudo brand journal about King Rhaenyra. Sam rules, subtle. King Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra was born in 207 BE before Earth on Gardner. He was accepted into the Guild of Riders at the age of 5, a standard age, and as the years passed, quickly became one of the finest riders that Rhone had ever seen. Certain records go as far as stating that Rhaenyra was unsurpassed in skill by any other rider of the day. By the time he was 90, Rhaenyra had achieved the rank of Guildmaster, and was well on his way to become the Grandmaster. However, due to his personal convictions, he never achieved that rank. Rhaenyra had long been a challenger at the views of the Guild of Riders, as well as the king himself. Rhaenyra was apparently very concerned with society's views pertaining to the purpose of riding, and the challenge of acting responsibly with the great gift given to us by Yavo. Around 73 BE, Rhaenyra was asked by the Grandmaster to write a descriptive book to a questionable age, least in the eyes of Reenaref. He perceived the age as being used to house an uncivilized race that could be used for the purposes of Dorone. Thus, Reenaref refused to carry out the command from his Grand Master, and after much debating was apparently dismissed from the Guild of Riders. Some records do point to Reenaref willfully excusing himself from the Guild, although regardless of how he left, much of the society found the dismissal unfair, and some even went so far as to call it detrimental to society. Around 59 BE, the fact that Gardane would not be able to serve Dorone as a home for much longer was confirmed, and the information made public. Reenaref had long known the state of Gardane, and from the time of his dismissal had apparently been working on an age that he felt would be a good place to live for those who wished to follow him. According to various journals, Reenaref managed to attract a few thousand Rone and convince them to follow him in the ways that he felt important and to the age that he had written. The king allowed Reenaref to split away from the Rone along with a few other smaller groups, while the majority of Rone left to Gardane to a new home world called Terani. Reenaref took his group to Earth, where he established a Dani, meaning new beginning. Reenaref was a strong leader, immediately establishing himself as king and reigning for 120 years until his death. Obviously, those who followed Reenaref to Dani already respected him enough to separate themselves from their family and friends, and thus records point to very few debates or disagreements within the society under the reign of Reenaref. As had always been the case with Dorone, a group of surveyors was sent to Dani before the group officially moved there to establish the Great Zero and the line emanating from it. A monument was built on the Great Zero in the year 0 DE. Dani era, presumably. Unlike previous occasions, Reenaref established the line of the Great Zero as set apart for holy buildings. Without authorization by the reigning king, construction was forbidden. Though it's never stated directly, records strongly implied it was Reenaref who chose where the city would be established. He seemed to base the decision in two factors, probably made the decision an easy one. First was the line of the Great Zero. It seemed an obvious spot to base the city, with the most important religious structures being directly on the line and the rest of the city surrounding its center. Second factor was a group of waterfalls that flowed from the ceilings of the cavern to an area adjacent to the line of the Great Zero. The fresh-flowing water was perfect for drinking. A new Riders Guild with fairly different rules than the one that existed on Gardane was constructed almost immediately, 8 DE, under the direction of Reenaref. By the year 100 DE, Reenaref had directed the recreation of the 18 major guilds. The guilds were dedicated to Yavo on the Day of the Circle, a celebration not only of the completion of the major guilds, but a celebration of new guilds, which Reenaref believed were healthier than those that existed in Gardane. Guilds that have been established to please Yavo not themselves, Reenaref said. Certain records point to the guilds on Gardane becoming extremely competitive with one another and focusing more upon having the best facility than carrying out their duty to Yavo and the people. In an effort to curb that kind of competition, Reenaref implemented a list of restrictions upon guild construction. The restrictions included guidelines pertaining to placement, facing the Great Zero, size, shape, and minor visual guidelines. Though one of Reenaref's top priorities was the construction of the temple, there were disagreements as to specifics, causing numerous delays in the finalization of construction plans. Eventually, construction was started on 48 DE, and the temple was completed in 63 DE. Known as Regil Tovocum, the temple to Yavo was meant as a place of worship, as well as a reminder of the prophesied great king who would come to them soon. Yeah, okay. Reenaref also made it a priority to install massive fans that would supply the cavern with fresh air. Natural openings existed, but it was quickly discovered that they did not supply ample circulation for the cavern. As a result, massive shafts and fans were built and installed over a 30-year period between 84 and 114 DE. It should be noted that numerous records point to a small group of Dani disappearing upon completion of the fans. It's most often assumed that they remained on the surface of Earth to live. Okay. Throughout his reign, records point to multiple occasions on which Reenaref refused to build a palace for himself. Instead, he lived in a very basic home, similar in fashion to most of his fellow citizens, and made it especially clear that until Yavo had a new home, he could not allow himself one. Although, even after the temple was completed, Reeneraf refused to build a palace, always focusing more on the religious and government sites. Reeneraf's own philosophy centered on the fact that it was much easier to focus on Yavo and his wishes when circumstances were difficult and struggles more abundant. It was strongly believed that Reeneraf's refusal to build a palace was an expression of that philosophy. In 120 DE, Reeneraf died of apparent heart complications. He was 327 years old. Though he had married, he left no children. As a result, he chose one of his apprentices, named Aelish, to succeed him. Taken from the Memoirs of Aelish, from the Oath of the New Guild of Riders, written by Reeneraf. Taken from the Journals of Grandmaster Najun of the Guild of Legislators. Gardernay's sun was dying and would rapidly cause a rapid decrease in temperature, making it an uninhabitable age. Uninhabitable, I think you mean. The Great Zero itself is usually based on a prominent natural landmark within an age. From the Great Zero, a line was drawn, usually toward magnetic north, to aid in navigation, construction, yada yada yada. It should be noted that the 18 major guilds of Denis were not necessarily the same as the 18 that had existed on Gardernay. In fact, they are probably much different. Though there is no information that details the major guilds of Gardernay, we do know that the guilds were meant to be flexible and serve the people and the needs of their time. Taken from a transcript of Reeneraf's speech on the first day of the Circle, the prophetical work of the Regal Tabak of Urpa, book Reeneraf believed strongly in, dealt with numerous prophecies of a great king who would be sent by Yavo to guide the people. Okay, so this is the lore room. Good to know. More of a lore rooftop, but what do I know? Stone hammers. Sounds fun. King Damath took the throne in 4692 DE at the age of 154. Though the public was generally not happy with the reign of G, it appears as though they were pleased with his choice of Damath to succeed him. Damath had joined the Guild of Maintainers at the age of 5, as most did, and rose to the level of Guildmaster by the time he was chosen as king. The selection was a surprise much to the public, apparently even to Damath himself. It was not a post he had especially desired to have. Almost immediately, Damath ordered a ban of all unnecessary links to be enforced by the Maintainers, while the Council carried out emergency meetings trying to decide their stance on the outsiders. In those meetings, the Council concluded that relations with the outsiders would continue, but with much stricter restrictions and guidelines. The list was long that Damath signed into law and included the restriction of any outsiders operating Denis machinery or linking books. Okay. Perhaps more importantly, the Council and King sent a clear message to all the factions who were out against outsider involvement with Denis. Their ideas would not be tolerated if they led to any infraction of the rules previously established by Losha Manish, which were to become strictly enforced. And though it was not stated publicly, the Reliama, meaning the unseen, was apparently ordered to double its membership and find any and all who were carrying out illegal activities with the outsiders. Ooh, seems we caught the age of Denis in a bit of a pickle, historically speaking. As well, Damath denounced the words of the Watcher as pure rubbish and nothing more than a desperately lonely man seeking attention. Fair enough. In 4721 DE, Damath pushed an amendment that forced the major guilds to accept the percentage of students who passed all entrance exams but could not afford to seat prices. It was the first such action in the history of Denis, and one that many seemed to question, especially the guilds themselves. Really? Free college? Questioned? America doesn't think so. Well, the people of America. Whatever, political something, I don't know. However, Damath was able to convince them it was a necessity for the society, and one to which they cautiously agreed. In 4724 DE, records point to over 10 separate groups being convicted of the Loshamanisht laws, as they had become to be called. Most agreed that the Reliamar played a large role in the convictions, although there are no official records of their involvement. Regardless, each of the convicted was sentenced to solitary confinement in prison ages. The convictions must have carried a powerful impact onto society, as the public still knew very little about the Relima, if anything at all, and thus had no idea how so many convictions were occurring. As one writer said, there were stories of dark shadows and mysterious creatures. For those carrying out such activities, it was said that the eyes of Demaf saw everything while his arms took anyone he wanted. The crime rate, especially pertaining to the Low-Shamanish laws, steadily lowered until 4752, where there were only 3 recorded convictions. Seems Big Brother was watching back then. Well, I don't know what got him started. In 4784 DE, an assassination attempt was carried out against Demaf, resulting in the death of 2 members of the Relima, who saved Demaf's life in the process. The perpetrators were found, and 2 years later, Demaf ordered their execution. It was the first execution of its kind, and was met with little resistance from the public or council. The 2 men were apparently linked to a death age, permanently ending their lives. Though most agreed that the execution, those who were against outsider involvement to begin with, now felt even stronger in their case. Now they argued, the knee is killing itself for the sake of the outsiders. Okay, we're definitely missing some major context here. In 4826, Demaf was rewarded for his efforts pertaining to the acceptance policies of the major guilds. The first of the Guild of Stonemasons, non-paying members, headed the effort to devise early fusion compounding technology, a building block for the eventual development of Nara. Ooh, I've heard you can make good padlocks with those, like really freaking dense padlocks. Demaf praised the guild and the numerous opportunities that all citizens of Denis now had to benefit their society. In 4843, at the age of 305, Demaf passed away, leaving the throne to his firstborn son, as kings often do. Someone's driving a hot rod outside in it's getting on late afternoon. I don't know what's going on. Also, we're in the suburbs, so why? Back on track. Some argued that G didn't make the choice of Demaf, but the Grand Master Emas of the Guild of Maintainers made it. The matter was never officially settled, though most contributed to the choice of G. From Demaf's speech explaining to the people that findings of the council meetings. By that time, the major guilds had become extremely expensive, and a large majority of the population, even if qualified to join the guilds, had no way to afford it. Taken from the private journals of Guildmaster Rayshan of the Guild of Archivists, from Revealing the Unseen, written by Besharin in 5999, Goshen, leader of the cult Blood of Yavo, made the comment in a public speech. I'm sorry, but if your religious organization has blood in any shape or form of the title, yo crazy. The comments were made by Demaf at the public announcement of the fusion compound. Okay, fair enough. Book number 3. I don't think this one likes me. King Shomat. Shomat took the throne in the year 300 DE, Dunny era, called it, at the age of 44. Up to the point of his coronation, he had been a member of the Guild of Writers. He continued his study of the art through private mentors for a number of years after his coronation. It was the lack of proper guild instruction that most of the historians attribute to the distorted views Shomat later took on. Ooh boy, we got ourselves a Caligula. It was an up and down reign, partly due to a tremendous tension that seemed to exist between himself and his older brothers. Both of the brothers, though likely they had little respect, did everything in their power to make Shomat's reign tumultuous. One of the first actions Shomat ordered was construction of a palace. When it was completed in 347 DE, first thing he did was build a cool house. Renarf would like to have a word with you, good sir. Okay, back on track. 347 DE. Shomat moved in with his family, although his brothers refused, and maintained their own homes. Such an act was regarded as a tremendous disrespect to a family, and only served to widen the gap between Shomat and his brothers. Furthering tensions not only within Shomat's family, but within the culture as well, was the lavishness of the palace. Ornate gardens were present inside the physical grounds, and garden ages were written as well, linking from within the palace. Rumors abounded that some of these garden ages were even wiped of their inhabitants in order to provide Shomat with relaxation. Whether true or not, Shomat often spoke publicly of the need for ages to serve the knee. This was a first for the society, and a direct contradiction to what the guilds taught, that the knee were to serve the ages. It seemed that eventually the tension became too much. Some say it drove Shomat mad. In 387 DE, both his brothers disappeared and were never found again. It's commonly presumed that Shomat wrote a death book to which both of his brothers were linked into, although it could never be proven. Regardless, it was one of the first major challenges for the people of Dni, and they reacted quickly. A prophetess was applied to Shomat in 400 DE in an attempt to guide him in the ways of Yavo. For the 155 remaining years of his reign, it seemed that most people believed Shomat became a better king. The prophetess became an excellent mentor for Shomat and eventually convinced him to choose the son of one of his close friends as the heir to the throne. His old children were admittedly out of control. As it turns out, it was the bloodline of that child that led to the birth of the great king years later. Shomat died of natural causes at the age of 299. Women were generally seen as much better communicators with Yavo than men, as were most prophets were women. I suppose it makes sense, like, lead the men to beat stuff up, and like, I don't know, biology, something, I don't know. So just treat yourselves with respect, okay? I don't know. Choosing other prophetesses as guides for the king started with Shomat and became tradition for all the kings of the Dni. It was usually up to the king in which the prophet or prophetess would seek for wisdom. Yeah, I know. Another hat. Same hat as before, but it's a hat. King Negan. Trying to move past stupid mistakes I made with fucking... I don't know. King Negan took the throne in 2356 DE at the age of 86. Negan did much to encourage the growth of the major guild of fine artists as well as the seeing of the other truths. The year 2500 DE, 1,000 years after the death of the great king, would mark the peak of what some would call the religious confusion. There are over 2,000 registered sects, and the original beliefs of Reenaref were known by very few. Negan was clearly not one of them. It is 2397 DE that most officially marks the start of the Dni Renaissance. In that year, the EMS Theater Company hosted the first play written by the playwright. The play dealt with the Pento War and the Great King himself, and was one which Negan praised. It ended up being sold out for 3 straight weeks and marked not only the start of theater as a popular entertainment source within the culture, but also the beginning of the Pento War subject, which would go on to become one of the most dealt with topics in their history and their art. In 2408 DE, the 33-year-old musician Aram began selling out concert halls, marking the beginning of yet another career of one of the great Dni artists. His music also dealt with the great king and many times ridiculing him. Negan praises people for being able to express their true feelings in such wonderful displays of art. Yeah, that's fair enough. Fair to have fair and honest criticism, because if you don't have fair and honest criticism, like, you're gonna screw something up. And if you can't help, if you get butthurt about screwing something up, why are you in charge? Like, being in leadership involves a lot of tough decisions, and if you can't handle the heat, get out of the kitchen, Yeah. Tell that to most despots, you'll get shot dead. In 2488 DE, the first successful extrusion tests were carried out by the Guild of Miners, and to great applause from the public, Negan used the occasion to benefit everyone. He appointed the Guild of Miners as a major guild, replacing the Guild of Fine Artists. He then split off the Guild of Fine Artists into the minor guild of sculptors, artists, actors, and musicians. The split was to encourage growth in mining as well as the arts, two major causes of Nagin throughout his reign. His proposal was strongly supported by Sira and Aram, as well as other artists who viewed it as an excellent opportunity for the growth of their respective fields. Fair enough. In 2500 DE, Megan proposed the construction of a new council member for the guilds. Somewhat surprising was that he suggested it should be built over the tomb of the Great King. The proposal was met with little opposition, and the construction began 2 years later. In 2502 DE, the tomb of the Great King was barely visible, a tremendous symbol of what the Deni had become. Later it was discovered that within the council chamber was a massive vault protected by puzzles of a sort. The tomb had always been known for its patterns, some of which were claimed to have prophetic messages. Nagin apparently had become enamored with the patterns and spread them throughout the unseen portion of the chamber, as well as the scene. Though the public knew very little of the vault at the time of construction, years later it was found to contain a tremendous amount of royal wealth, something Nagin often publicly encouraged. We got Kadish, the former, here apparently. Of course, most were not able to save the amounts Nagin did, but still the idea of saving one money for future generations was strongly encouraged by him. Oh, for future generations, that's what it was started out as opposed to just dibs. How times change. History just one big game of telephone, I suppose. Nagin died in 2533 DE at the age of 263, leaving the throne to his third son. In memorial to Nagin, Sira wrote another of the more popular of his plays entitled Our Great King. It was the first play performed by the Minor Guild of Actors in 2535 DE. Taken from a journal to Var in 375, from a speech by Nagin christening the Minor Guild of Musicians. Though the official church registered a complaint, it seems there was little heart behind it. Apparently even a prophetess of Nagin supported this proposition. What's in there that needs hiding, other than money? I don't know. Someone had an accident with the ink pen. King Asimleth took the throne in 5999 DE at the age of 54. Asimleth inherited a people who were philosophically confused. The Watcher versus Gif versus the Great King / Devar. But technologically advancing. Many great construction, mining, and scientific inventions. Expanding within the cavern at a great rate, and moving toward diminishing the involvement of the outsiders within their culture. As well, the fighting that scarred their past was at a minimum. Good to know. Asimleth continued the peaceful trends by attempting to isolate no one, but instead welcoming everyone in any beliefs they might have had. It seems he took no stance on any of the varying religious ideologies being passed around and allowed any and all religious factions equal access to property, government help, etc. While disregarding no beliefs, he was able to hold his own, some which were unknown to Deni up to that point. Though never stated publicly by Asimleth, common opinion and historical records point toward numerous servants being used by Asimleth, most brought from outside ages. Ooh boy. More so were the apparent challenges Asimleth held with these servants. Details were hard to find, but it seems as though these challenges ranged from hunts by Asimleth himself to gladiator-style battles between the servants. Should be noted that regardless of what actions occurred, there was little public outcry against them. Ooh, that's bad. Instead of philosophical or religious beliefs, Asimleth instead focused on mining expansion, construction of the new districts, and offering equal opportunities of culture and social benefits to all classes. As far as outside involvement, Asimleth publicly argued that the order from his father to all the guilds was not realistic, and that outside involvement would always be needed to some extent. Knowing the comment would anger some of the factions, he became the first king to publicly invite the more extreme factions, who wanted no outside involvement, to his palace for numerous talks on the issues. Okay. So no decisions were made in the meetings. The meetings themselves apparently calmed the factions and created a better overall feeling that the two could come to a decision in the future. Around the same time, two key writers from the Writers Guild left to join the Writers of Yavo. Charming. Up to that point, the group, who believed it was their duty to write the perfect age, had been relatively small. Like the Writers of Yavo, most of the popular factions or cults were of the day focused on Yavo in one way or another. The old cults, such as the tree and the sacred stone, had vanished for the most part, leaving way to disagreements in the beliefs of Yavo for the most part. Asimleth passed away in 6284 DE at the age of 339, leaving the throne to his third and youngest son from the line of Karaf, written by Fall in 6985. Worth mentioning is the rise of Yavo did eventually become one of the three largest sects in all of the Ni. After the Judgment Age, most of the Ni believed one would either end up in the Perfect Age or Takuf's Age. Obviously, most wanted to live in the Perfect Age, but there were, of course, a variety of beliefs now that was accomplished. Hold up. These riders, the Yavo guys, were they just trying to build a portal directly to heaven? Methinks your higher deity would like a word with you. King Ailish. Ailish took the throne in coronation ceremonies in the year 120 DE at the age of 170. Though it seems Ailish had never been a member of the Riders Guild on Gardane, he had spent the first 50 years of his life with Reenaref after his own dismissal, working on the Book of the Ni. When the Ni Riders Guild was formed in the year 8 DE, Reenaref made sure Ailish was placed in charge as the first Grand Master of the Guild. As Grand Master, he had worked closely with Reenaref in the writing of the new Guild of Riders Oath. The oath, which was that every member promised to live by, ended up staying in existence with few minor changes until 9400 DE. Records indicate that Ailish modeled his life very closely to Reenaref's. He refused to build himself a palace until a common library was opened, and strongly supported a place where all citizens could have access to books. Though there was some minor disagreement on minor issues, the building was eventually finished in 233 DE. Although, like his mentor, Ailish still refused to build himself a palace. The reign of Ailish was extremely similar to that of Reenaref. There was still great excitement for the new ideals and laws of the Ni, and there was great support for Ailish, making his reign a very smooth one. Good to know. Before his third son was born in 256 DE, records indicated there was a bit of public apprehension over who the next king would be. Ailish's two eldest sons were fairly rebellious, and neither seemed good candidates for the throne, at least in the public's opinion. However, as Ailish's third son grew, it became apparent to the public, although records never give specific reasons, that the boy closely followed his father's ideals. Ailish must have agreed with public opinion, as it was his third son who he selected to succeed him. Ailish died of natural cause at the age of 350. Yeah, the Ni people live a long time. Yeah. What's this? What's this right here? Mysterium 2000. How charming. And a man-old gift book thing right here. That's cool. Marriage. Much more than modern cultures, within the Ni culture, all citizens were expected to marry. In fact, it was even believed that marriage was an important part of a relationship with Yado, as it taught and revealed the necessary requirements in such a relationship. Both marriage relationships and a relationship with Yavo were described by the same Ni word Tagon. Literally translated, the word means to love with the mind, and apply to deep understanding, respect, and most importantly, unselfish love for one another. Fair enough. Obviously, the religious influence on most of the Ni culture was very strong, and as a result, marriage was not something taken lightly. It was considered a lifetime commitment, and as for a Ni who could live to be 300 years old, it was obviously not a decision that Ni felt to be rushed into, and it seemed as though it rarely was. Some records point to arranged marriages, though for the most part it seems that the decision was up to individuals. Marriage was not permitted before the age of 25, and marriage between blood relatives was strictly forbidden. Damn straight. Just no. Though allowed, marriage between the classes was looked down upon. There it is. Marriage to other worlders was practically unheard of. I found certain writings from the 9000s going so far as the mixing of Ni blood and outside culture is a quote-unquote travesty. While others wrote that such a child who marries an outsider was better off dead. Yikes. The marriage ceremony itself was not a single-day event, but one that took over 5 days. Then the section of the ceremony to which one was invited was extremely important, and it was considered a disgrace to be invited and not attend. Yeah, like, we just got this cake out and everything. What are you doing here? Well, not doing here, you know. The event usually began with a small ceremony held on the evening before the first day of the marriage ceremony. The ceremony always took place at the home of the groom or his parents, and was meant to confirm both the bride and groom's decision to be united to one another in front of their immediate family. The groom presented his bride-to-be with a gift representing the confirmation of his choice. The acceptance of the gift by the bride-to-be was acknowledged by her decision. Immediately after her acceptance of the gift, the bride-to-be was escorted away with her family and not to be seen by her groom until the joining ceremony that would take place on the 5th day. Bad luck, I think. The first day was meant for the bride and groom to spend time with their families. As they were starting their own family, their old family would no longer be the highest priority. Thus, the day was set aside to spend time with that original family. Traditionally, the day ended with a large meal, as well as speeches and blessings from the parents of the child. The second day was spent for the bride and groom to set aside for them to spend with friends, both married and unmarried. Traditionally, one of the friends would host a large dinner at the end of the day. The third day was reserved for spending time with the soon-to-be in-laws. It was on the day that the bride and groom received blessings from their in-laws, as well as other members of the family. Again, there was a traditional larger meal at the end of the day, marked by speeches from the eventual in-laws and soon-to-be family members. The fourth day was for the couple to spend time alone with Yavo individually. Although many apparently viewed the day as a formality, others viewed it as the most significant of all days. The day was often filled with prayer, asking for Yavo's blessings upon the event, as well as a time to understand Yavo's desires for their new lives together. It was also considered a time to purify themselves before Yavo. Some chose to spend time with the priests or prophets, while others read the holy books and talked to Yavo himself. Fair enough. The 5th day was the day of joining. The early portion of the day was set aside for physical preparation, while the latter part of the day was set aside for the conjoining ceremony itself. For those who did not have access to private ages, the ceremony usually took place on marriage ages. For the upper classes, the ceremony took place in family ages. All family was expected to attend, as were fellow guild members. All those in attendance were divided into two sides. One side represented the groom, while another side represented the bride. Between the two sides, in the center, were a long aisle and a triangular podium. The bride and groom would each approach their side of the podium by walking through their respective family and friends. It was, after all, those family and friends who had made the bride and groom what they were, and Denny believed it was those family and friends who should present their bride and groom to their spouse. The priestess usually stood on the side of the podium, the third side. As with most important events, especially the marriage, the bride and groom wore the bracelets they had been given at birth as well as maturity. After the bride and groom arrived at the platform, the father of the bride would remove the bride's bracelets and give them to the groom. Then he believed the giving of the bracelets represented the giving of the bride's purity and adulthood to the groom. Charming. A short speech often followed the event. The father of the groom would follow the father of the bride with identical procedure, giving his son to the bride. Fair enough. The giving of children was followed by an expression of both parents of their blessings upon those being joined, as well as all those present. Symbolically, the bride and groom then switched sides to represent acceptance of all the bride's family and friends of the groom, and vice versa. Both the bride and the groom then handed all 4 bracelets to the priestess. While the priestess led the couples through their commitments to one another in Yavo, the bride and groom placed their hands upon the podium. During the commitments, the couple made promises to one another, followed by promises to Yavo. All were recited aloud to the priestess. The priestess usually reminded the couple that marriage was also a reminder of Tegan, don't know it to mind, and that their love should always be a representation of their love for Yavo. Following the commitments, the priest would place 2 new and larger bracelets upon the bride and groom. The groom's was placed upon the left wrist and the bride the right wrist. The new bracelets were meant to represent both the purity and maturity bracelets their spouse had previously worn. The Denny emphasized that the spouse was now your responsibility to keep pure and knowledgeable of good and evil. The bracelets were meant to be a constant reminder of that responsibility, as well as the commitment to maintain the best for that spouse. Don't drag me down and I'll keep you up, sort of thing. After the new bracelets were placed upon the wrists, the hands of the bride and groom were wrapped together with a tight cord, covering the wrists and hands completely. Upon completion, the priest placed a ring on the pinky of each free hand. The rings were symbolic reminders of the entire ceremony and placed on the fifth finger to represent the joining that took place on the fifth day. Yeah. The priestess would then usually remove herself from the podium so the couple could take her place. Together, the couple then walked down the aisle between the two parties and toward the far end of the aisle where a glass of wine waited for them. Before drinking, the couple knelt and prayed together together. After the prayer, they each drank from the cup, and two sides of the hall emerged into one group, often with great celebration. They were now considered joined, and the celebration could begin. Families usually fed all in attendance, and there was typically dancing and music. The couple was expected to keep their hands united throughout the night as a reminder that they are now joined in the eyes of man and Yahweh. The binding of the hands was apparently meant to be somewhat troublesome, symbolizing there would be difficult times for their relationship, but that those times did not affect the fact they were now joined. Fair enough. Following the celebrations, the tradition was for the couple to embrace and the priestess to touch a linking book to them so that they would both link to vacation or honeymoon type ages. Though these vacations are usually short, it's not unusual for the man to not work up for a year in order to build a new marriage. I should also note that the cord used to join the couple's hands together was also viewed as a sacred item. It seems as though various couples use the cords in a variety of different ways, some using them for necklaces and others hanging them in their house. Fair enough. What's this book got? Hey, it's Osmo. Yay. Maturity. Similar to a variety of other cultures, the Dene celebrated a child's entrance into reason and maturity. The Dene believed that true maturity, or the age of reason as they called it, was achieved at the age of 25. For that, the Dene believed that children's minds and hearts were not properly formed. Up until that time, they weren't even so far as to say it was impossible for a child to truly make a correct decision, as they were too easily controlled by other motives. That did not mean what they did was not right or wrong, but the Dene believed that Yahweh did not hold them accountable for those decisions. Up to that point, it was apparently up to the parents to judge and protect, and thus another reason society encouraged couples to have only one child at a time under 25. In the ceremony of readiness, the Dene celebrated a child's entrance into reason and maturity. At the ceremony, the child was presented with a bracelet of knowledge, also translated maturity. I have to admit the translation is somewhat poor and makes it sound like a magical or superstitious item, something it did not sound like to them. In fact, it was a fairly serious item. The Dene viewed the bracelet as a sign of accountability. The individual, once given the bracelet, was expected to be responsible for his or her actions, as he or she had true knowledge of good and evil and the wisdom to make the right choices between both. Associated with the bracelet were certain rights as well as expectations to behave in a more correct manner. From a religious standpoint, the ceremony readiness signaled accountability to Yahweh as well as fellow Dene citizens. No longer were parents judged for the actions of their children on a religious level, and no longer was lack of knowledge an excuse to Yahweh. The Maker, they believed, now expected much more from them. Fair enough. Though the age of reason was 25, the Dene did not consider true wisdom to come until much later. With not nearly the fanfare the age of reason brought, at 125 years of age there was another celebration for reaching the age of wisdom. Most importantly, regarding that status, the Dene were allowed to become the highest ranks of teachers or leaders, grand masters or lords. The same rules applied to women, and no woman under the age of 125 was technically allowed to advise, especially the kings. As well, it appears that a woman's fertility ended around age 125. During the time of the kings, the advisors were required for those kings who were under the age of 125, as the king himself had not achieved the age of wisdom. The great King Alcindar was the only king who did not have an official advisor, and even though he was under the age of wisdom for the majority of his reign. Fair enough. I guess. I don't know. Oh boy, this one sounds juicy. Pregnancy. Now this is surprising. I can't say for sure, but it seems fairly clear that Dene women were only fertile for one Dene day every 2 Dene months. In service terms, that's roughly only 30 hours every 72 days. If true, it explains quite a few things. First, why are there so few children for people who live 300 years? And secondly, the reason behind a rather large celebration of pregnancy. As far as I can tell, these celebrations were usually limited to family members, although were rather large. There was quite a bit of prayer to Yahweh as well as blessings from the family members. These blessings usually included vows to care for the pregnant woman and child throughout the coming months. As I have mentioned in other areas, pregnant women were believed to be much more insightful, and as a result, part of the pregnancy experience, although not part of the official ceremony, was using that insight to gain revelation from Yahweh. Though there was quite a bit of religious meditation respect from women during this time, I won't go into it here. However, this meditation was expected to primarily guide the women to their child's future, and its purpose won't take around seriously. Okay, I've been doing too long. Sorry, just know, the way, freaking men fight so the women don't get a shot to the gut and lose the kid, that's just how biology made us. Apparently it's also how biology made the Dini, although I don't know why they had such a problem having the kid in the first place. I don't know, but don't judge on other people's biology. Don't judge if they don't agree with their biology. Just don't be an ass. You okay? That too hard? Please? I need to stop recording at 3 in the morning or something, honestly. Well, it's not 3 in the morning, but it's getting close to night. Whatever. Apologies for getting political. Because it's the internet. And we can't have politics here now, can we? While pregnancy within marriage was cause for great salvation, the same cannot be said of pregnancy outside of marriage. And it comes creeping back in. As far as I can tell, anyone who became pregnant was expected to immediately marry, and a child conceived out of wedlock was unable to join a guild for his entire life. As well, no revelation was expected from such a mother. It was equivalent to curse to a lower class woman, as her child would not be able to attend a guild for the upper class. As far as I can see, gestation was a full year, 10 Dini months, 290 Dini days, equivalent to 1 Earth year. I have found no records of multiple births. Whatever. Class system. Class structure. Seems as though my first inclination toward class structure was incorrect. Though early on there was little in the way of a class society, such a high ideal faded quickly. By 9400 DE there were 7 very distinct classes. Elite. The lords and the grand masters of the major guilds. It was possible for private citizens to be accepted, but if so, abundant resources were needed. It was only the elite who owned private libraries of books in the private islands. Quite a few obvious attempts to reach out and unify the classes, although I'm not sure it did much good. Common libraries, major guild scholarships, renovation of poorer districts, all seemed more political than life-changing. Not surprising, I suppose. Guild members. Yes, it was possible for the lower classes to attend, but it seemed by the end the schools were far too expensive and prestigious to allow for such. As a result, the graduates became a class among themselves, and a very high one at that. Upper class, lowest of the 3 higher classes. Such citizens had succeeded in private enterprise and most likely provided the elite with their banks, pubs, etc. No major guild education for the most part, but enough money to buy their way into the upper classes. Middle class, mostly shop owners and the like, able to afford some luxuries in the need, but still considered far from the elite. Rare but possible for them to own books as well as private ages. Seem to make up most of the minor guild enrollment. Fair enough. High poor. The higher class of poor seem to be made mostly of industrial workers, many of whom spent their time on foreign ages, before it was outlawed, of course. It seemed that this class, along with the lower 2, did not own books. Low poor. Joy. Can't seem to find a better name for them. However, it seems clear that there were 2 classes of poor. Those low poor were relegated to their own districts, and rarely even seen even with the middle class, and never with the upper classes. Possibly used as servants, although they were generally looked down upon. Sublow, reference to the least, an undefined subclass, are found on rare occasions, not enough data to elucidate. Yeah, he's just talking about that with our old journey cloth thing. Something's going on here. Other than me cringing for my cord, bringing up politics on the internet. Oh, I'm going straight to the dislike bin, oh boy. Check this out. I know the DRC doesn't want us to touch these, but I bet Watson would like to know how these register up the doors too. Makes no sense. And don't lose it. It could barely get off the wall. When it did, it was pretty scary. Maybe the weirdest thing when I went back later, the cloth I got this piece from was intact again. Nick. So there's a security measure in those things. Like you try removing it from the wall, you take 2d6 psychic damage. Also, I got a new ad. Yay. King Mayaman. Nothing like looking into the exploits of fallen emperors to listen to like journey up from fucking, I don't know. King Mayaman took the throne at 5240 DE at the age of 83. One of the biggest announcements of Mayaman's reign came rather quickly and was offered by the Guild of Miners and Stonemasons who had worked together. In 5307 they revealed Nara, as it had been created in a laboratory weeks earlier. Nara offered tremendous opportunities for mining and construction, and ended up having a massive impact on future opportunities for Denis. Even at the time of its release, there was apparently much excitement about its potential. Good to know. In 5312 DE, disease broke out in the industrial district of Denis, most likely originating in the world of Age of Yasefe. The outbreak caused widespread panic, as many predicted another plague similar to what had occurred during the 2100s. Fortunately, the illness was not nearly as lethal as the aforementioned, and the Guild of Healers reacted extraordinarily fast in finding a cure. See, you find politics everywhere we look. I don't know, freaking... Whatever. This is more current events thing anyways. Not even current events, it's a couple of years past. But like, still, like, just... Oh, I'm going to get disliked to hell for this. I just know there's going to be some fucking people. Regardless, there was again a new push to at least separate the Nerural district far away from the city proper. Mayman apparently liked the idea quite a bit and encouraged the surveyors to begin looking into such an expansion. In 5359 DE, Denis received another great reason to begin major expansion, and it came to be in the form of Stone Tooth. It was the second of the Great Diggers, and quite a bit more powerful and technologically advanced than the older Stone Eater. Mayaman immediately ordered the Guild of Miners to begin clearing an area, along with Stone Eater, for a new industrial district replacing Nerural. It was not until 5475 DE that actual construction was begun on the new industrial section Urin. Less than 100 years after Stone Tooth, in 5473 DE, the Guild of Maintainers announced that the newly discovered Derathony could be used to create much improved and much more protective maintainer suits. Though such an announcement may not seem especially important, the new suits ended up having a great impact on Denis culture. Since the maintainers were able to take bigger risks with the type of ages they could explore, the Guild of Riders were allowed to be a bit more liberal in their riding, and a new breed of age was begun. During Mayaman's reign, words became a common topic of discussion, and attention was again given to older temples. Evidence points to numerous remodels and renovations that made the secular temple that had been built many years earlier on the new land of Great Zero. Oh boy, they moved it. It seemed that Mayaman himself paid little attention to the religious pulse of his people, and being much more interested in technological advancements and city expansion to care. Once Mayaman felt that Stone Eater and Stone Tooth were no longer needed, he recommended using them to build an underground tunnel connecting the island to the city proper, and minimizing the need for boat travel. His proposition was not embraced by any means, especially by the upper classes who were living on the island. Apparently there was a number of protests for fear of the effect the tunnel could have on the island. What are you talking about, like structural integrity problems, or there are now poor people on my island villa problems? I don't think it's the former. The proposal was also rejected by most of the guilds, causing Mayheman not to force it. In 5500 DE, the first imports from other ages were linked to the new Urin district, much further from the city. Urin was said to be a tremendous improvement over the older Noerl, much more advanced, much safer, and there was tremendous celebration on the day of its opening. Security was tight in the new district, as it was revealed later that Dorelia Ma had uncovered a variety of plots intended to display some of the fraction disagreement of the district. In 5540 DE, Mayheman's only son became extremely ill and ended up passing away 6 months later. As a member of the Guild of Healers, Asham was often the first to investigate new ages to make sure of their safety in relation to the disease. As a result of his death, the age was not approved until a cure could be found. Mayheman considered the action of his son heroic and changed the name of Urin district to Asham a year after his death. Goddamn. It was said that the death left Mayheman deeply saddened, devoid of the excitement he had shown throughout his reign. May said it forced him to the prophetess Dressari. Mayheman apparently spent much time with Dressari in his last days and was able to die a content man because of her. Mayheman died in 5549 DE at the very ripe age of 392 and chose his nephew, probably on recommendation of Dressari, to succeed him. Metallic gravestone, 3 times the density of steel, and the hardest of all the niche stones. Yeah, you could really clunk someone in the head with that, I tell you what. If you could throw it more than 6 inches, I suppose. His nephew was mostly forest and provided Denny with a good portion of its wood supply, including the expensive and rare Yema. Cool. The industrial district was formed during the reign of Nidra and served as an importation center for most of its outside goods. The newer ages allowed for much more experimentation with atmospheres, animal life, and energy sources. From the Guild of Grandmaster Bishar, the Guild of Stone Miners. From the journals of Prophetess Sari, assigned to King Mayheman. It should be noted that processes had been assigned to all the kings, but for the most part had become nothing more of figureheads rarely consulted. From Asham, written by Ramaman in 5589. Okay. Something about Karath. Took the throne in 6731 DE at the age of 54. Karath is probably the most well-known name of all the kings, not because he was necessarily considered the best, but because he was the last. His name came to represent all the kings in later years, including their renaming of the Arch of the Kings to the Arch of Karath. His mother had raised him to follow the teaching of Gish, and by the time he took the throne, he was believed to be a wholehearted believer in the followers. Because of that, and the experience of watching his father interact with his advisors, Karath had decided to form from an early age that the king was no longer the correct way that Dunny should be led. Fair enough. At least, he argued, not until the true great king would come. The fact that Karath, in a single reign, was able to convince his people that the way they had been ruled for thousands of years was wrong and should be changed, should be considered nothing short of miraculous. Karath carefully crafted his arguments as a benefit for all the guilds more than anything else. After all, he argued, Denny is the guilds, let us be protected by their fortress and be ruled by their wisdom. Yeah. I suppose when the king gives the crown to the advisors, not much you're gonna do about it. It was hard for this guild not to support a proposal that removed the king from the highest authority and replaced him with 5 lords. Lords that would be automatically chosen from the Grand Master of the guilds. Like I said, common sense. It gave all the power of the knee to the guilds, and there were only a few Grand Masters who seemed to disagree. Those few were known as faithful followers of the great king, and Rhaenyra, who had always supported the role of kings. Fortunately for Karath, those people believed a variety of different philosophical ideologies. Only those who faithfully followed the original teaching of Rhaenyra and the great king were disturbed at the thought of no king. And it was the majority of the Ni who no longer followed those beliefs, but instead those of Namiya, Gish, the Watcher, and various others. As a result, it was a cultural impact that the public had to overcome, not a religious one. Karath, attempting to further please the guilds, recommended new renovations and additions to the council chamber and construction of a new guild hall. meant to celebrate the new power that would be theirs. Be a symbol of new power of the guilds and lords, and further insult to the great king, burying his memory even further under government construction. Meh. Construction began at 6970 DE on the new guild hall. There was no better symbol of the attitude of the need than 6970 DE. The tomb of the great king was further buried under massive buildings dedicated to government and the guilds. By the end of his reign, Karaf had convinced the majority of the Ni on his own beliefs. Most claimed to be followers of Gish and his writings, and most viewed the outsiders as a threat. If not now, then soon, Karaf often said. After his death, Karaf's words would be proven true if the onset of the Medus War. Outside factions invaded with attempts to destroy the ink-making and book-faking guilds and almost succeeded. By the time the war would end, there would be few left who did not follow Gish and thus believe in the end of the most outsider involvement. The discovery that conservative factions had led to the start of the Medus War would come much later, when it was far too late to alter the conservative trends. Regardless, in 6977, the Karaf abdicated the throne and gave the power over the kings to the first 5 lords of Dunny history. They were Lord Terry of the Guild of Messengers, Lord Hemela of the Guild of Healers, Lord Moleth of the Guild of Caterers, Lord Kedri of the Guild of Writers, and Lord Korenin of the Guild of Analysts. Karaf died 8 years later. Time of Kings was over. Taken from Karaf's public speech in which he first proposed the idea, from the first 5 written by Tarvis in 7000. Yeah. Where to axe my book, and why did someone take it in the first place? Nick. Good question. Someone left their lunch here. Probably smells. Matthew, the last batch of papers you sent were very interesting. Since you did such a good job, I got no lists I'd like you to divvy up to the team. How you do it's up to you. 1. I'd like some more information on family life, ceremonies, etc. Anything related to birth, marriage, cultural events. I know we have quite a bit of source material for this, so anything you get would be helpful. I think we've gathered quite a bit on science and technology and not enough on the personal lives of these people. Yeah, could have been better. But that's just how people are. Everyone can be better. We have quite a bit of guild information, but gathering that all up into one tidy area would be nice. Don't see that on the table. 3. The followed is still an obvious area where we are lacking. Not sure I can help you with research material, but given the latest information we are getting, at some time we are going to have to dig into this. I recommend assigning someone the sole task of the fall. You want intel on the fall? Go read the Mist books. Not the Book of Mist. I mean, like the actual novels based on the World of Mist. Maybe not Book 3. That was kind of so-so. 4. Continue on with the kings. A short synopsis of all the kings would be helpful, following the formula started with the last batch. 5. We still have religious writings. We need to translate. These are going to be the most difficult, but I think they can give us large amounts of helpful information. 6. We have a stack of journals from various Ni residences, etc., not to mention ages. Think that'll be more than enough for now. Again, thank your team and tell them they're doing great work. Dr. Watson. Good old-fashioned Mr. Rawa, the Dunny Sleuth, or whatever that name was he gave himself. I don't know. Wait, I already have this hat, never mind. That's a cool building. We'll be back next time.